Welcome. We're going to do a little bit of a Johnny talk about something that came up recently, inclement weather, and what's the policies and how do we handle them. And the interchange brought it to my attention a little while back, and instead of going out and writing an email and sitting down and doing the policy, we thought we'd sit around the table with some of the RLT members and just do a little video to just walk through what policy 1240.1 looks like. Let's call this excellent change management. As we all giggle, that's okay. So, 1240.1 is an inclement weather policy that was signed back in 10/27/17. So it's been recently updated, and it really has a lot of definitions of what's going on, but there's still some confusion around it. So I'm going to go through a few definitions before we get too deep into this, and some definitions and procedures of what it means. So first one. Closure of state facilities will occur only when extreme weather conditions exist. CDOT employees unable to report to work because of inclement weather must use annual leave unless the governor or executive director, which has been assigned to the appointing authority, deems it, or their representative, designated representative, specifically declares all or directly impacted CDOT state facilities closed to non-essential employees. You're going to ask, why is that important? Well, we're going to talk a little bit about that. So another one I wanted to talk about, CDOT will honor emergency road closures, decisions made by county, municipal governments, or state patrol. CDOT employees affected by state or local road closures may be granted administrative leave. Could be delayed starts too. So let's say you're in a neighborhood, you're in Boulder, and Boulder says they're in shutdowns and they're not cleaning the roads and something goes on, but state highways are okay. Work with your supervisor, because if it hasn't been deemed a closure by either the governor in the Denver metro area or your appointing authority from your area, then you have to work with your supervisor and explain what's going on, because sometimes you will have better actions with them. And on delays, hey, I'll make it up. Hey, I'm just going to take leave and not come in for a half a day until it clears up. That's you and your supervisor working towards those, unless it's a state declared or appointing authority declared emergency. Authorities for closing state facilities in Denver. Now this is critical for everybody to understand. Facilities in Denver, metropolitan area, rest with the governor or his or her designated representative. Metropolitan area includes Denver and its suburbs within 15-mile radius. You're asking, why is that important? Well, it's been, the state government offices are in the center of Denver, right? So a lot of those main offices and the divisions are down there in Denver. And the governor has the right to close or put those offices on delays. But let's say the storm's in Denver, but it's not, and I'm going to go way out east to Sterling, Colorado. There's really no storm out there. So he's really not declaring that all state offices are closed, state offices within that radius of his governing body. So that's important to know. So when a governor writes out, all state offices will be closed, it might not pertain to you, and we have to be very cautious with that and try to do better communications of where it is. Now, if the storm's in your area or he writes all state offices across the state are closed, then that's a different discussion. But we have to give our governor that ability to make that. Does that make sense to you guys a little bit? I mean, Is there any questions on that?
Well, and possibly the opposite of that. So let's say that I'm in Sterling, and there's a large storm, just an isolated storm in that area, but there's not in Denver. So what would be the process for the supervisor to approve some admin leave in that situation?
So I'm going to get to that bullet point. That's a great question, Juliet. The governor has delegated the authority to the executive director or their designated representative to close all or directed impact state facilities outside of the Denver metro area during times of severe weather. So that would be the executive director and I would collaborate together. I would call and say, hey, and we're going to talk a little bit, and I want Tim to talk about this. Hey, we're going to close the state offices down in Sterling. It's unsafe conditions. It's not hitting Denver. And I would collaborate with the executive director. She would say, yeah, Johnny, I agree with you. Go ahead and do it. And then I would make that decision to close the Sterling area down. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. But not everybody would be closed down, because we're going to get into essential and non-essential employees here in about a second. So that will then follow up on that discussion. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So once the governor has delegated that to me, and the executive director has given me that in my delegation memo. I get a call, let's say at 4 o'clock in the morning, from Tim or my RE in Sterling, Jeff Vickers. And they say, Johnny, it's really bad out here, man. I don't know if it's safe for people to travel into the office. So the first thing I do is I call up Tim or my event coordinator that's on call, and I say, Tim, do we got any roads closed out there? And he might say, yeah, we got 6 closed, we got 76 closed. Well, that right there starts telling me, if we're closing roads, then I need to making different decisions for the safety of the people, right? So Tim would give me that. I would make a decision. I would call the Denver and say, hey, we're closing the Sterling office for everybody but essential employees, right? And Tim then would talk to me and we'd do that. Or I might say, Tim would say, yeah, but Johnny, MDSS, which Tim wants you to explain, says that it's going to clear up at 9 o'clock and the roads will be clear by 9. So I might say we're going to delayed start so everybody can report on a delayed start and show the office will open at 9. So Tim, sort of talk about your MDSS system and how that helps you and I make these decisions.
Well, just like Johnny said, the MDSS system is there for us so we can see, have a look at current weather and future weather that's coming in. So if there was an issue in Sterling and we had a snow event going on and our LTC ops out in the area is giving us information as far as road conditions and weather at real time, then we can look in the MDSS and it'll give us a forecast for the next 2 hours or 24 hours or what have you. So in that instance, if we know the snow is going to clear up or the storm's going to move out at 9 o'clock, and Johnny can then determine we can delay the start time for the people out there. That gives us maintenance a chance to get out there and get the roads somewhat clear so they can travel in safely into the job. So MDSS helps us to make that decision because we can see the current and future forecast from that perspective and how much precipitation we're going to be getting.
Tim, thanks. That's a great way to help. People need to know that we don't just make decisions just nilly-willy. Johnny's just not up in his office in his ivory tower just checking off a box saying close it. But so we make decisions through information, not just random. That's good to know. One of the things I want to clarify is essential versus non-essential. If you have not been deemed essential employee, not everybody in this department is essential. You're essential to get the work done, but in terms of a weather delay or inclement weather issue, there's very few people that have been deemed essential. And all of our maintenance guys have been deemed essential. And even some of our RE offices, when we have road closures, then we bring in to help with road closures that are deemed essential, but they're not deemed essential on a permanent basis. So you need to understand if you're essential or if you're not essential and what that means in your work, right? Because if it says the road's closed except for non-essential people, you have to figure out a way to get in to do your job because people are relying on it. So please read the policy on essential employee and non-essential employee so you have a better understanding, right? I mean, you don't want to mess that up. So just some generic things. The appointing authority may excuse employees who arrive late to work because of extreme weather conditions for up to 2 hours. Now, work with your supervisor. Your supervisors, your program engineers are going to be calling me and saying, Johnny, I can't get people in, and I'm going to say, hey, work with them up to 2 hours if they want to do it. But what's the number one question we keep getting is, I just live down the street. Do I get that 2 hours? Do I have to be in at 9 o'clock, right? There's a lot of times people just show up. Brian, you had a situation where people showed up on an inclement weather day and they were asking a lot of questions.
What do you do in that situation where somebody does show up on time and you granted a 2 hour delayed start?
You have to work with your employees. If they're here, obviously they were able to get here, right? So when I look at that as an appointing authority and they made it to the office, right? And they're in the office and they're working, why would I have to grant them 2 hours of administrative leave, right? They're here, they're working. Now, if you can't get in and you have good reasons for not getting in, that's a different discussion, right? That 2 hour delayed start. So we really have to work with our staff, and I'm not going to come down and start yelling at you guys because you didn't give this person or that person, but that's where a lot of the tension starts with our employees is, well, I didn't get the 2 hours admin leave. No, thank you for coming in. You were a big help, right? And that's how we got to understand that if you can get in and you're in, obviously the inclement weather didn't stop you from getting in, and you will be working. So I don't see that 2 hours of administrative leave being delivered, and we got to be really cautious with that.
Sorry. One thing that might help, as well as I think even in the PD, it's encouraged that there's a phone tree, so that comes really early. So in the morning, maybe they get a text and say, hey, we have a late start, so that person who might normally leave at 6:30 isn't thinking, I have to leave my home at 5:30. They might leave a little bit early, but not so much so that it puts them in a safety situation.
Communication is the key. Go ahead, Tim.
I was going to say, what does a delayed start really mean? Because my understanding of it and someone else might be different. For instance, if I'm supposed to be in at 7 o'clock and there's a 2-hour delay, but I normally leave at my house at 6 o'clock, do I still leave at 6 o'clock to get in? Or do I wait and leave at 8 o'clock so I get in at 9 o'clock?
So what I would look at as a delayed start, and this is up for discussion amongst us, that's why we're doing this, is when I have a delayed start, it's really for the safety of the traveling public and the safety of you. So if you feel that it's unsafe for you to be traveling and it's been granted a delayed start, you have to make those decisions. Do I want to leave a couple hours later instead of being in at 7? Johnny said 2-hour delayed start, so that's 9 for you, right? So you leave at 7 instead because the roads are going to be better and traffic's going to be filtered off the road. So that's safety for our folks in the office. So we as managers have to work with our staff and knowing when their start times is. So if there's a delayed start and the communication came out early, if we can get it out the earlier the better, says the offices are on a 2-hour delayed start, that means if your start time's at 7, you don't have to be here till 9, right? So if you do have those situations, take your safety into consideration and work with your supervisor that texted you on the message saying, hey, I'm going to be in a little later. It's unsafe. Now, I've only given 2 hours of administrative leave, but you have to work for your personal gain, and I'm giving you a couple hours working with your supervisor. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Because some people live a long ways from our office. Yeah. Some people work in Greeley and live in Boulder, so we got to make sure that we're taking care of them as well, but they have to understand that some of those were their choices to live there too. So we really got to work with our staff, but understanding that there's choice made in decisions, right? So does that help?
That helps. In an opposite situation, if there isn't a delayed start, and you have a storm that comes in that maybe is stronger than originally forecast, and you have employees that text and say they're on their way, but due to the weather, they're going to be a little bit late. What's the best way to handle that? If the
appointing authority, the governor didn't put on the work on delayed start, as a supervisor, work with your staff. Let them make it up, right? If they can't make it up, the policy says then you will take annual leave. So if they're here and you worked with your staff and they were communicating with you and just not communicating, that's a different discussion. But if they text you, say, hey, this storm hit and I wasn't predicting this, I'm going to be about an hour late, work with them to make it up. And if they can't make it up by the end of the week, they can take an hour annual leave, and that's okay. But we try to work with them. You can make it up in that week, right? 40 hours is 40 hours. So that's the supervisor's ability to work with staff because I haven't deemed a delay to the department. Does that make sense? Does that answer that question?
Perfectly.
Okay. Anything else that maybe the people on the video might want to know or better understand?
Probably one question I think that came up in our interchange meeting was a lot of times in outlining areas on those county roads, you might have a one-off situation that maybe a supervisor has given a blanket, no, we're not going to have a delayed start, but we have that one employee that might be out on a county road that is closed. They're really concerned about getting in because they're deemed a non-essential employee, but they feel like they need to get in. So what's your thoughts on that to help supervisors and employees kind of collaborate a little bit so that we put everybody in a good, safe situation?
We have to work with our local governments. If the county has not plowed the road, because the counties don't plow the roads like CDOT. You guys, we all know that, right? Sometimes city streets, they plow, but they put it right in your driveway and you can't get out. How many times have we all dealt with that, right? You as a supervisor have to work with those one-offs and your folks, right? You don't need to call me and say, hey, Johnny, I got a guy that can't get in. The policy specifically says if there's a local closure, work with your staff to make sure they can get in. Now, you can have them make it up, or they can take annual leave if they can't make it up. The important part about this, and I really want to stress this, if you're on sick leave, annual leave reflects you will not get the administrative day. You will not get the delayed day. We have to understand that if you already have a predetermined off time, you're not going to be part of this discussion. You're going to, hey, you're on flex, man. That's your day off. You're not going to get 2 hours later to use another week or something. We really, on inclement weather, have to do our best to do what's right for the taxpayers and do what's right and fiscally responsible for money. So that's sort of, I think, what's important.
Well, what if, you know, because the governor just gave us administrative time off. So what's the difference in that and you giving time off a 2-hour delayed starter on administrative leave? So
there's some sarcasm I'm going to use here, but I think it's important. The governor is all of our bosses. He can do that. He's remember, it's the governor, the executive director, and then the folks out in the field, the appointing authority. So if he gives you time off, that's the highest level of state government, and our commander-in-chief said you're getting time off. With inclement weather, it changes the discussion because it's not just a blanket statewide statement. Does that make sense? So we really got to be cautious with that. And administrative leave is watched. I have to turn all administrative leave that I give in to the Department of DPA, and I don't want to get to the position where they start taking administrative leave away because we've abused it. So we got to be really careful as appointing authorities in that sense. But if the governor says you're off, I have no way to stop it.
Thank you.
So what else? One of the questions I hear often, can I work from home instead of coming in today? Well, working from home has not been deemed as something that I let people do work from home and as an appointing authority. If you work with your staff and he or she can work from home that day and you feel they're going to be productive and you can see production come out of them and you as a supervisor deem it, hey, I'm going to let you work from home today, that's the supervisor's call for that individual day. You don't get to do a mass blanket on that because I haven't given that authority. But, you know, work with your staff. If admin leave's given and you're working from home, guess what? You won't get admin leave. Does that make sense? So you gotta understand that if you're given the permission to work from home, that's a plus. And then all of a sudden 2 hours of admin leave comes in and the other people sit at home going, well, I could have had 2 hours of admin leave. Well, no, because you decided to work from home and your supervisor gave you permission. Anytime anybody works from home, has to have permission for their supervisor, whether it's snowing or not. One of the things I want to close on is safety is really your responsibility. And anytime we look at safety, if you feel it's unsafe, safe to one person might look different than safe to another person when it comes to driving on roads. If you feel you need to take a day of annual leave and you want to just stay home, you have that benefit to be able to do that. So don't rely on somebody else to tell you it's unsafe. If you feel it's unsafe and just say, I'm going to take an annual day and I'm going to stay home and I'm going to stay off the roads, please be cautious with your own schedule and time, because I don't know where everyone drives from or everybody's roads. So if you feel like, hey, I'm just going to call in and take an annual day just because I don't want to deal with this today, that's okay. Because take care of yourself. And we're not going to punish you for taking an annual day because even though it's a quick one, we understand that everybody sees it different. So thanks for joining us. Take care of yourselves. Inclement weather is not always easy to discuss and always easy to handle. Safety is our #1 priority, and thank you for joining us.